Good afternoon and welcome everyone to the Governance for the Public Sector Cloud webinar with Vertosoft and CloudTaber.io. My name is Matt Duda. I work for CloudTaber, and today's discussion will focus on ensuring continuous compliance in the cloud. Just a few housekeeping details before we get started today. And I mentioned this a couple times already. We'll be accepting questions throughout the webinar today using the Q&A function here. So for that, to get through today's content, everyone's been muted that's joined today's webinar, but again, you can submit your questions throughout using that Q&A function. We're going to leave plenty of time at the end to answer those questions and take any additional ones that come up. Also, just so you know, this webinar is also being recorded and will be available later this week for reference. That's about it, though. So to get things kicked off, I'd like to turn it over to Chet Hayes, Chief Technologist at Vertosoft. Chet.
Thanks, Matt. Much appreciated. It's good to be with everybody today. We appreciate you taking your time to join us for this conversation. So as Matt said, I'm Chet Hayes. I'm the Chief Technologist here at Vertosoft. We focus on working with some of the best and innovative emerging technology companies that are out there and helping them get introduced to the public sector. And with me today, I'm going to have Ibrahim introduce himself, and then we'll get going.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks a lot, Chet. So my name is Ibrahim Tawfiq, and I'm a Senior Solutions Delivery Manager with CloudTaber. And my days are spent really ingrained in the customer experience, addressing all pillars of governance. And my primary role here at CloudTaber is to make our customers' cloud journey as easy and seamless as possible. And I hope to do a little bit of that today by showcasing our approach to continuous compliance. Back to you, Chet.
Yep. Thanks, Ibrahim. So today, we're just going to talk about briefly this concept of the compliance challenge, what's out there, what we're seeing in the marketplace. We're going to focus on how to be able to automate that. We're going to talk a lot about continuous compliance and show you a way that organizations can actually be able to actively have continuous compliance throughout their entire organization as they move into the cloud. So as we get going into that, we start thinking about these challenges that organizations are seeing and that we're seeing when we work with many of our public sector customers. It focuses on a couple of different things. And it goes back to, in this specific study here that we're referencing, people are always complaining about how technically complex the cloud can be. And they're always talking about, in some form or another, how do you maintain a comprehensive security profile, and how do you ensure compliance? We hear this over and over again with all of the customers that we're dealing with. And as organizations use the cloud more and more, they start following best practices that they get out of Amazon, like Amazon's governance at scale document. It becomes more and more challenging for organizations to be able to get their hands wrapped around all of this. And the other thing that we've seen as it relates to security, in that one study that was done by Thales earlier in the year, 29% of federal government agencies had reported that there was some form of a breach. And it's definitely higher than the global sample in that study. And ironically or not, 29% of government federal agencies report they have failed a compliance audit. You can maybe infer that there might be some correlation to all of that. And from a public sector perspective, we see a lot of different challenges that tie back into these things that relate to the ability to provide compliance. For those of you who are familiar with FedRAMP, or even what we're seeing coming out of CMMC and HIPAA, a lot of those controls that are documented live in spreadsheets. And we have seen many organizations manage their compliance using those exact same spreadsheets. They keep them version controlled inside of either a wiki or on SharePoint. And for every environment, they're going through each of those controls and they're annotating or making notes or a check mark within that spreadsheet. And that's good to some degree, in that an organization can then go through each control and say, yep, here's what we're doing and how we're doing that. But when you start getting a large number of accounts, if you're, again, doing governance at scale, you probably have a development account, a test account, a production account for a single program. And if you have multiple programs, you can imagine the number of accounts that you're trying to manage this across. So we see organizations struggle to maintain consistency across all of these programs. And it becomes even more of a challenge when one of these policies change. And you've already got something deployed, a policy has changed, and now you've got to go back and figure out, well, all right, what do I need to change? Who's out of compliance? Who's in compliance still? And be able to run those reports. And so that becomes, we've seen that become a very big challenge for many of these agencies. A couple of the other things, we've already hit on it, FedRAMP, HIPAA, CMMC. We threw CMMC in here because federal system integrators and those agencies or those companies who are doing business with the federal government are going to have to become CMMC compliant. For sure, level 1. For those who are doing services, level 3, and for some of the bigs who are doing some of the more advanced stuff, some of the more secure stuff, that level 5. And they're going to have to deal with upwards of, I think level 3 is 130 different controls, all of NIST 800, 171, R1, plus 20 additional controls. So being able to manage that and effectively do it, and being able to provide a clear set of controls and guidance to the organization is going to be important. That's going to be key. The other thing that we have seen related to compliance and security goes back to how organizations may have configured or set up their cloud PMO. In a lot of cases, we hear from the development teams that they feel that their cloud PMO is the department of no. Anytime they want to do something or they want to make a change, they're always being told, no, it can't do that, or no, it's going to take us weeks to make that happen, just to ensure that there's compliance is in place and security is in place. And I think that becomes an inhibitor, obviously, to the adoption of what organizations are trying to do. It inhibits the mission. It prevents them from quickly getting to a point where they're able to be more innovative or get new functionality and capability deployed into the cloud. And so we strongly believe that there is a better way to do this, an automated way. So you've got this concept of an automated approach to compliance. And as we go on to that, there's 3 principles that if you've ever heard CloudTaber or us talk about that these 3 principles of governance at scale, the ABCs that we call them, being able to manage all your accounts across all your environments, budget enforcement, so you can deal with like the Anti-Deficiency Act, and as well as just budget management, and lastly, this notion of continuous compliance. And so if you were to think about how to automate that and what that might look like inside of an organization, agencies themselves want to be able to set their own rules, right? They want to be able to say, you know what, our agency, we are required to say we can only use cloud services that happen to be in the US regions for AWS, for example. And they want to be able to enforce that across their entire agency. And on top of that, all these agencies, they have individual departments. These departments themselves have their own rules and requirements. And each department has maybe their own set of programs and projects. And all of these things, if you build up the hierarchy, there's a variety of policies that need to be applied. And from an automated perspective, we have found that if you can build up a hierarchy of policies that can be inherited across the organization, you're going to be able to push your governance all the way down into the project level so that the project teams are able to do their work. They're not having to go back all the time to a central PMO for help, and that you're going to find that they're going to be able to actually go quicker and move quicker into the cloud. So in the example here on the screen that you're seeing, we've got a situation where an agency has done exactly that, right? They've set up a policy where they want to restrict any usage of non-US AWS regions. And so they've set that up across the agency. And then a department will inherit that specific policy about the AWS regions, but they may also want to be able to go in and set a specific policy around the type of EC2 instances that they want to allow people in their department to configure. that could be for a variety of reasons. Maybe that's related to cost or some other reason, but they want to be able to do that. And then individual programs inside these departments potentially have different requirements. In this specific case, this program is only allowed to use services that have received a FedRAMP high authorization. And so by being able to build up this hierarchy of policy, and then as a project, when somebody goes to try inside the AWS console or Azure console, and they try to go and do something that violates that specific policy for that organization, they'll get a note saying, hey, can't do that, and you can click here to learn more. And there's value to that in that, one, if they're within policy, they can go and do their thing and not have to go back and ask for permission. And two, it'll give organizations the ability and the warm fuzzy, if you will, that they're able to enforce their guardrails. And so if we think about this in a big picture of this concept of like a 360-degree view of compliance, right? We've got this notion of being able to prevent, in real time, prevent users from doing something they're not supposed to do. And second, if something's already in production, a policy is changed, we need to go back and be able to figure out who's out of compliance, right? We need to be able to detect where something is now no longer in compliance, and then be able to report on that and then remediate upon that. This notion of a 360-degree view can all be automated. And by automating it, organizations are going to be able to more effectively get to the cloud. Their program teams are going to be more efficient. And I think that they're going to see a much larger ROI in their cloud investment. So with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Ibrahim, and he's going to talk about a solution about exactly how we do all of this. So Ibrahim, it's all yours.
Yep, awesome. Thanks a lot, Chet, for that awesome overview. So for those who are just joining us for the first time and may not be familiar with CloudTaber, I want to start with providing a quick overview. So CloudTaber is a multi-cloud governance solution that's designed to make customers' lives easier in the cloud by focusing on those same three pillars that Chet mentioned earlier. So account management and financial visibility and budget enforcement. And then the topic of today's webinar, continuous compliance. So a couple things about CloudTaber. We install within an AWS or Azure environment, right? So that's your own environment. So we're not a SaaS solution. And our goal is to be a very thin pane of glass for all users. And we're designed to provide cloud visibility, access, and control. And we do that while still maintaining the native experiences of the cloud providers. So things that folks are accustomed to and have come to love. So that means that we're also not a cloud broker. Our goal is to make it very simple for all levels of an organization to get access to data, whether it be financial, identity, or security, from going from that day-to-day user all the way to a C-suite, for example. And while the purpose of today's webinar is to dig into security and compliance, we're happy to at any point kind of provide a full-scale demo of what CloudTaber has to offer. So please don't hesitate to reach out. So what is continuous compliance, right? Hopefully by the end of today's session, we'll all leave with a better understanding of not only what it means, but also how CloudTaber is poised to be the solution of choice to achieve continuous compliance, along with general multi-cloud governance. So our approach to continuous compliance follows this life cycle that Chet was mentioning again a little bit earlier about prevention, detection, reporting, and remediation. Each one of these we're going to dig into a little bit here shortly. So it's important to note that due to the elastic nature of the cloud, achieving compliance at one point in time doesn't always ensure compliance going forward. So the continuous piece of compliance is extremely vital for success. And while there's a laundry list of benefits that come with instituting and ensuring continuous compliance, a few of the positive outcomes I'd like to highlight begin at the ability to continually reduce an organization's risk exposure. So whether that be from a security standpoint or from a financial perspective. So avoiding security vulnerabilities and not having to fork up expensive fines. These rank among some of the top concerns for many of our customers. And just as important as it is to reduce the risk and fines, it's also vital to ensure that the guardrails and compliance that you put in place achieve your goals without jeopardizing the productivity of your organizations or even limiting innovations. So the way in which we provide continuous compliance begins at prevention. So for those folks who are already familiar with CloudTamer, this is where we focus the majority of our efforts up until continuous compliance. And we're really excited about not only where it's come, but also where it continues to go. So within prevention, we have this notion of cloud rules. And cloud rules are a really powerful object in CloudTamer, and they're designed to help an organization deploy fully automated and fully compliant cloud workloads across hundreds or even thousands of cloud accounts. And in addition to deploying that infrastructure, they can also be used as a way to ensure that you're fully compliant. So kind of the example that Chet was mentioning, ensuring that you're within the US regions, or that you're only utilizing, certain types of EC2s and SKUs. So cloud rules are a really fundamental aspect of not only CloudTamer, but also, they're one of the building blocks for a lot of what we're going to see here today with respect to continuous compliance. So moving along from the prevention side, right? So obviously, in order to have good compliance, you need to be able to detect drift. And for that, CloudTamer has a compliance engine, which is powered by a globally recognized security and compliance framework called Cloud Custodian. So if you're familiar with Cloud Custodian, it's an open source tool that was developed by Capital One. And we've built that engine into our platform, which not only extends our capabilities with respect to compliance, but it opens the door for a wide range of other features that Cloud Custodian has to offer. So with detection, we make it really simple to monitor workloads in the cloud, whether it's something that you want to schedule on a particular frequency or manually run at a point in time, or even detect based on an automatic trigger of an event. And that's actually what we're going to demo here and see as part of the demo a little bit later in this presentation. So once you've detected a finding, right, our goal is to make it really simple and easy to visualize it and enable reporting on it. And for that, we've designed this compliance dashboard. And this dashboard provides a real-time look into all the findings filtered by things like severity. And it gives you the ability to take action on these findings, right? And be able to view and even share this information with other folks in your organization that need to be privy to kind of what's going on from a security perspective. And then last but not least, what we believe closes out this continuous compliance lifecycle is the ability to remediate your findings. And there are a number of ways to do this, right? So whether it's automatic remediation or even just saying, give me a report on it and I'll go ahead and later suppress or archive. And we'll take a look at these different approaches as part of the demo. So altogether, this is what we believe builds out the continuous compliance lifecycle, covering both the proactive and the reactive measures. So with prevention, which is designed to stop you from falling out of compliance, detection, so in case the preventative mechanisms that you've put in place either didn't meet the need, or if someone was able to circumvent the guardrails in place, reporting, where we provide the visuals on the findings, and then finally remediation. So again, either through a manual or an automated means. And so from our experience working with hundreds of customers utilizing our platform, this is really what we've seen gives them exactly what they need in order to achieve compliance in the cloud. So with that, I'd like to actually switch over to a live demo, right? Because while words are nice, the action is where the fun actually is. So what we'll see here as part of the demo is going to be the manifestation of all the concepts we just discussed, right? So starting at the prevention, moving on to detection, reporting, and remediation. And we'll also get to see continuous compliance in action. So for the folks that are familiar with the CloudTamer application, right, you'll notice that there's a compliance tab here, now part of the main navigation bar. And it incorporates the three main pieces for what we provide with respect to compliance. So at the micro level, we have checks, which are really just the policies that run on resources within your cloud accounts. Then we have the standards, which the checks basically roll up as a collection under a standard. And basically, it's a way to group together checks to meet various postures or compliance regimes. So things like best practices, CIS, NIST, HIPAA, CMMC, kind of the full list of what Chet was mentioning earlier. And then we have the compliance overview or compliance dashboard. So the findings that we get from the standards all get consolidated and displayed in the centralized dashboard, which is designed to provide a single view of your entire organizational state of compliance. So if we dive into the checks here, right, the first thing we notice that out of the box, we're providing 120 plus checks. And our DevOps team is constantly working to create new checks. So every single release, we add into this additionally. But anytime you purchase CloudTaber, you get these out of the box. So you'll notice that we've got a variety of things, across both AWS and Azure, checks that are CIS related, just general CloudTrail, security groups, kind of the full breadth of what you might be looking for from a security and compliance perspective. And if we were to look at this CIS check, for example, right, we can take a look at the kind of different pieces that make up this particular check. So if I quickly look at the edit screen here, you'll notice that I can set the severity, right? So depending on how your organization defines the severity or the necessity to take action on a given finding, so all the way from critical down to informational. I then have the ability to choose my cloud provider, so AWS or Azure. Have the ability to enable auto archive, which basically just allows you to say that, hey, if we get a finding, someone goes in and takes care of it. When CloudTaber runs the next check and it doesn't show that finding, we'll take care of clearing it from the system for you. And then here we can select our check type. So we've discussed Cloud Custodian, but another piece of what we provide is this ability to ingest external findings. And that basically allows us to say, if you're using other tools where you're already generating findings and you're accustomed to that, you can still send those things to CloudTaber, and we'll consolidate that as part of the same view that you get here, but also make it really easy for you to federate into those accounts and kind of take care of the remediation aspect, again, from an external check or system that you might be utilizing. So what we notice here is the standard YAML policies that Cloud Custodian utilizes. And here we can define the resources, right? In this case, it's running on an S3. It's saying that, hey, I need to check to see if an S3 bucket where CloudTrail logs are being sent is not publicly accessible, right? And then here we define the filters. And this basically is the conditions that need to be met for there to be a policy violation. And then the action section is where it gets really interesting. So out of the box, we have a default action that basically sends findings back to CloudTaber. But you notice that we actually have a commented out finding here or commented out action section here. So the nice thing is, right, I can easily take this comment out and say, hey, if you get this finding, I want you to auto remediate. Right, so it's not just give me the findings, display it for me, kind of send the alerts. CloudTaber can also be that proactive measure of taking what we found and going and saying, okay, we found an S3 bucket that was open. Go ahead and shut down that open access. And then we have the ability to set the frequency. So the checks that we provide out of the box all run in what's called pull mode. Cloud Custodian supports other modes, one of them being CloudTrail. And actually, that's the check that we're going to run today is actually running in CloudTrail mode, which basically, is a Lambda deployed and it's monitoring to see if a security group gets opened up to the world, right, across IPv4 and IPv6, it'll send the finding back to CloudTaber. So we'll get to see this in just a couple minutes here. The last thing you notice, right, we get to select the regions where we want this particular check to run on. And that kind of, covers the aspects of a specific check. And then, like I mentioned, checks get rolled up into standards. So if we take a look at the standards, right, a couple of them that I've built out already. So we have best practices, we have CIS, FedRAMP, CMMC, NIST 171. So the idea here being that, checks or standards are nothing more than just a container, but the power of standards comes with their association to a cloud rule. So I mentioned earlier, right, cloud rules are a very powerful object in CloudTaber, and they incorporate everything that you see here. So if we were to take a look at a network security baseline cloud rule, for example. So first off, right, we can push out all the AWS settings, all the Azure settings, and then we can associate a compliance standard to that same cloud rule, right? So the idea being that one cloud rule becomes that mechanism to close the loop on both the proactive and the reactive measures, right? So one of the best practices that we recommend is that you couple the necessary compliance and guardrails, that standard, with the counterparts in their settings on the AWS side and the Azure side, right? So this takes care of saying, hey, I'm going to deploy that compliance, but it also ensure that it remains within compliance and that there isn't any drift. So if we take a look at a particular project, right? So let's look at Asana Research. The first thing we notice is we see the other tabs for the other pillars that I mentioned earlier that CloudTaber addresses. So if we quickly look at the financial tab, right, we get this financial visibility and ability to dive in at a very granular level with respect to the finances that are associated to a project. And you can think of a project being synonymous with a cloud account. And so we can drill in, we can filter by things like services, by cloud provider, by tag, and even kind of providing you this real-time visibility into the costs that are associated with a project. This then ties in directly to enforcements, which gives us this ability to have different types of triggers that are tied to a financial or enforcements that are tied to a financial trigger. So we can do things like just a notification, a kind of a visual, hey, this is doing something that it's not supposed to. Or again, assigning a cloud rule to a particular budget enforcement and allowing you to take some, more action for a particular enforcement that shows up. So you might say, hey, you've exceeded a certain amount of money or your budget has been exceeded, do X, Y, and Z. And that's what enforcement kind of allows you to do. We then have cloud management. So we can see that there's a variety of different cloud rules that have been applied, all inherited from different levels of an org structure. So how you design or how your organization builds out the hierarchy of its cloud presence. These cloud rules can be associated at any of those levels and will automatically inherit down. And then we have cloud access roles, which basically allow you to assign permissions to the various users or roles as they federate into the native consoles. So you also notice here we have the compliance tab, right? So this is kind of a summary at the project level. And again, everything that I've shown with respect to financials, enforcements, the cloud rules, compliance, we're viewing at a project level, which is kind of the smallest unit of organization. But if you were to look at your entire organization, you could view this at any level, right? So you can say, I want to go to the top of my organization, visualize the financials for it. I want to see the enforcements. I want to see all the cloud rules and compliance and guardrails that's been deployed. And also any compliance standards or checks or findings, as we see here, rolled up at various levels of that. So the first thing we notice, right, we have the active findings that are associated to this project. Again, 3 medium severities. They're all kind of CIS related. But if we federate into a particular account, right? So let's say I want to go into this AWS account and see if I can log in as a developer. So if I choose my web access, you see I'm taken to that native AWS console. So again, going back to that not being a cloud broker, right? We maintain all these experiences that your users are accustomed to. So if I go over to EC2 and say, okay, I want to look at my security group. If I've got so let's take, for example, this default security group. Right now, we only have one inbound rule. So if I were to adjust this and say, I want to add a rule and allow traffic from anywhere, right? So this is going back to that rule that policy that we were looking at to say, I want to basically violate this policy and see what happens from that. So if I go here and say, okay, I want to allow traffic from everywhere, go ahead and save this rule, right? I've got these additional inbound rules for the security group. Again, it's one of the default security groups that we have associated here. So if I go back to CloudTaber here and go over to compliance, right? And let me look at the additional findings here and refresh this page. So what we'll see here, just give this a second to populate. And right then and there, I've got this critical finding, right? So it was under maybe 5 seconds of me kind of doing it. And now it's automatically showing up in CloudTaber. And if I had an action as part of that same policy that said, hey, I need you to fix this, we would have already taken care of it, right? So not only do we get this immediate notification of a critical severity check or finding that was discovered, but we could have already taken care of it. But if not, we could also say, hey, security team, something came up. Here's the ID number for a particular finding. They can quickly come in here and federate into that account or subscription and say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and take care of it. Once they've done that, they can circle back and say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and archive this specific finding, right? I've taken care of it. Or you say, hey, you know what? I'm okay with this finding, right? I understand that the check went out and found it, but for whatever reason, I'm doing some testing. I need the security group to be open to the world. You have the flexibility to also suppress that finding. So what you're seeing here, right, has been at that project level. Again, I mentioned earlier that to get that holistic view of an organizational state of compliance, we can do that at this compliance dashboard. So a couple things here, right? Again, this is across AWS and Azure, across all the cloud accounts that I have and that have associated standards to them. I can see all the non-compliant standards, any checks, and the findings. And you notice I get this +1. So it kind of gives me this indicator of something has changed since yesterday. I get this graphical view of all the findings. Ideally, this is going to be trending downwards because either I've got automatic remediation in place in those checks, or I'm manually going in and remediating those, right? So this is going to be trending downwards. I can quickly see all the different OUs and projects that are non-compliant, and even to a specific standard level, right? I can see that from a CIS perspective, I've got 18 active findings, right? So that's something that I definitely want to address. CloudTaber best practices, I've got 61 findings. So this is something that we kind of bring that to the forefront. So it's not just sitting out and happening in the background. We've provided you these findings consolidated into this visual. Again, our best practice recommendation would be build in as many of the remediations into the specific checks so that this is constantly happening, it's constantly checking, and it's constantly ensuring that, hey, yes, you've said I want it to be this way, but it's also going back in and ensuring that it remains that way. So everything we've shown so far shows how CloudTaber can help an organization close the loop on security and compliance and ensure that you not only have a mechanism to deploy compliance via those cloud rules, but you can sleep well at night knowing that it will also remain within that compliance. So with that, I'd like to open up the floor for any questions that folks may have, and also wanted to take a quick opportunity to thank everyone for taking some time out of their day and joining us for this webinar.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Ibrahim. Really appreciate your time and all the information available in that demo. Just really cool to see. So let's take a look at our question and answer field here. Again, if you have questions about anything we've covered so far, you can submit them into the question and answer field here in a Zoom webinar. So I'm just going to start with the first one that came through, Ibrahim, and it's about the standards. So it's my org currently follows the CIS standard. Will this standard be available out of the box?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think our approach was to first build out as many checks as we possibly could, right, that addressed all the different standards. We are working on consolidating those into specific standards. We've already got a few matrices built out for 853, 800, 171. The idea being that we'll help you not only assign, these are the compliance checks that you need to associate, but also the cloud rules that you should associate, right? So the standards are something that we're working on, and they'll be part of a future release coming soon.
All right, perfect. Thank you. All right, another one here too on, are there any opportunities for integration with the compliance engine?
Yeah, that's an awesome question too. So I gave a little bit of a sneak peek of that when I showed the check type. So we have that external aspect also. So before I get into that, we're actually working on direct integrations with Tenable, Nessus, Security Hub from AWS. So we're actively working on just built-in integration, so you wouldn't have to do even any work with our API. But that external check basically allows you to say, hey, I've got this existing system. I can easily send those things to CloudTaber, kind of roll it up in that same consolidated view that we showed. But even beyond that, right, Cloud Custodian has a lot of really cool integrations already built in. So whether it's through email, Datadogs, Slack, or Splunk. And we've actually put out, our VP of Engineering recently put out a blog post kind of discussing that integration and how to go about doing that with Slack and Splunk. So I'd recommend for folks who are really interested, either reach out to us directly and we can dive into that, but certainly check out our website and look at those blog posts because we've got a ton of great information out there.
Awesome, thank you for that. This is along the same lines, not directly on integration, but what learnings or best practices have you experienced with customers that have started using this continuous compliance engine?
Yeah, so I can start with that, and then Chet, maybe if you want to kind of add on to that question there. But I think the biggest thing we've seen is that there's a full spectrum of benefits that folks have seen, right? So there's some people who they've already kind of used this compliance, they've got other tools that are running, but they may not have had that ease of visualization, which I think our dashboard really provides. So their ability to kind of visualize from different scans all in one place. But I think that one of the biggest things we've seen is that there are a lot of folks that didn't realize how out of compliance they were until they started running these across even regions that maybe they're not accustomed to utilizing, right? There may have been services that were running in other areas that they had no idea about. One check across their entire cloud presence on AWS or Azure, opened their eyes to everything else that's available or that's maybe out of compliance. So that gave them the flexibility to take action on that, or even say from a security perspective, hey, we need to do a better job of ensuring that we're trending downwards in that same graphical visual that I showed, right? That's been one of the goals that a lot of folks have taken on to say, I want to see this as low as possible, right? So it's almost inspiring in that sense of when you see it in your face, you're more likely to say, okay, I need to do something about it because it shouldn't be in this way, right? So.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I think the other thing that I think there's huge value in is organizations having a single, tool to provide compliance across both the security side and while we didn't really focus on it today, right? I'll call it the financial side, right? This is a single tool that you can provide financial policy as well as things like CIS, FedRAMP, those types of policies, and be able to manage those controls. And to Ibrahim's point earlier, right? This is an enabling technology, not a broker type of technology. So organizations are using the direct cloud consoles that they're already familiar with. They've got one tool that's managing all of their compliance, both from a financial perspective as well as a security perspective. And I think the power in that gives them the confidence that they're going to be successful in going forward.
Perfect. Thank you, gentlemen. Just looking, if you haven't already, please submit your questions into the Zoom Q&A feature here, and we'll address them. Just got another one here. So can I take your compliance findings and send them to my security team to handle via an incident management tool or anything?
Yeah,
maybe Ibrahim?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I will say, even before I dive into that specifically, the one thing that we've really prided ourselves on is our ability to make everything so that there's parity with respect to what you see in the UI and what our public API provides. So that fully enables that need for, hey, yes, I've got these findings. Now I have a separate team or a separate tool that manages this. You can easily take all the findings and have them sent to whatever tool that you have existing or that you're looking to have deployed. And again, that ability to do those integrations is across all three pillars, right? So from a financial perspective, from an enforcement, cloud rules, everything we have is available via our public API. I think just compliance was maybe like 160 additional endpoints, right? So there's a lot of flexibility with integrations, and we actually very much encourage that. And a lot of the calls that we have with customers are talking through how can we best integrate so that enables us to extend what we've already been doing, right? We've put a lot of capital into these additional tools. We have them for X amount of time. We want to be able to leverage that. CloudTaber is fully supportive of that, and we actually will push that as much as we can.
All right, great. Just looking through here, last chance on any questions. Submit them now into the Q&A feature here in Zoom Webinar. I'm not seeing any others or typing. Ibrahim or Chet, any last thoughts or words before we wrap for today?
Not from my perspective. I think, folks, I appreciate you taking the time. I'm hoping everybody can understand and see the power that continuous compliance can bring to your organization, and especially the power and the flexibility that CloudTaber provides. And if there's any other questions, we'd love to be able to chat with you and talk about your specific use cases on that. Abraham, anything from you?
No, I think you summarized it very well, right? Like I said earlier, before we started the webinar here, we love talking to customers, and we love getting feedback with respect to new features or kind of things we want to be able to do or enable via our platform. So please feel free to reach out to us. You've got our contact information right here on the screen. So yeah, other than that, thank you all for joining, and we really appreciate you taking the time.
Right. Thank you, everyone. No additional questions have come in. Appreciate everyone's time today. Hope you found value in today's session. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.